Hey, welcome to another episode of Being Spiritual at RU with Father Scott, and I'm Pastor Matt. We are heading into part two of our discussion on Christian nationalism and this wonderful book called The Psychology of Christian Nationalism. And so this week we wanted to discuss chapter two, which is specifically why are people driven or drawn in by extremist beliefs. And so the author addresses reasons for why people join movements like MAGA and other Christian national movements. Um, so she spends a lot of time in this chapter drawing out
Mhm.
and giving evidence for it, using a lot of anecdotes. She does her research really well, I think. So if you have an opportunity to pick up the book, we're not going to go through all of it. We're just kind of give an overview, but if you do have an opportunity to pick up the book, it's helpful um,
Mhm.
to kind of read some of the history and the movement. She went all the way back into the 70s and 80s of evangelicalism, and
Yep.
um, what kind of led to that. If I had to summarize it before we dive into her specific points, I would say um, she would say movements like this do a good job of making clear identity markers for how to join that give people maybe who are discouraged, lack hope, comfort that if they follow these identity markers, they'll be accepted, they'll be valued, they'll have a purpose, their problems will be solved.
Right.
Um, and so we discussed some of that last week, with some of the moral codes that Christian nationalism has. But I think the reason people do join is because following those things kind of gives them some comfort that I can do it. I can pull myself up by my bootstraps and I can fix my life.
Right.
We can fix our culture, kind of thing. I don't know if you had any thoughts
Yeah, about
on
sort
that.
of people who feel a bit disenfranchised, who feel that they can, if they join a larger movement, that whatever the feeling they have that might be alienating them, or they feel like somehow left out, that will be kind of washed away or kind of like minimized by the larger group belonging. So, um, yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of she talks about she's a psychologist, so but she talks about the psychology of why people feel alienated from whatever they're trying to achieve, but that historically this is when they're so vulnerable in a lot of ways to other groups, other like movements that draw people in. So, um, but yeah,
Yeah, we see
this
it
is
throughout history that
yeah,
movements like these happen and people get sucked in. And
right,
um, in some ways, for me, I always look for ways to show compassion. And, you know, I think
yeah,
that's a way to show compassion that people get sucked into these things, not really thinking it through, and they're just reacting, to their
right,
problems and they hear a good message or that tickles their little ear and
right,
um
right.
you
And they
know
feel a need to belong,
yeah,
and they don't aren't getting that right now, and there's a reason why. And so yeah, they focus on finding a larger group to belong to, so they don't feel isolated.
yeah, so that's her first point in this chapter is the need for belonging and purpose.
Mhm.
um she says surround sound evangelization. um
Right.
and this is where she spends a lot of time going into evangelicalism and the movement of revivalism, and she shows kind of how I guess culture moves from kind of evangelizing to join the church to really evangelizing to join a political movement. um
Right.
and that shift happens in the 80s
Hmm.
with the moral majority and Falwell and
Hmm.
Reagan.
Reagan.
The
Yeah.
vote for the American Christian vote pre-Reagan was split. You know,
Yep. Yep.
between Republicans and Democrats. I mean, Jimmy Carter was the first, Catholic practicing Catholic president, so he carried a lot of Christian vote. Um,
Do you mean not Jimmy Carter? Do you mean he was a Baptist?
Baptist, yeah. Sorry.
I was gonna say because
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
um,
Biden. Biden. Biden.
JFK was the first
Biden.
Baptist or first Catholic. So yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, yes. First Baptist, he taught the Sunday school.
yeah, he was
And
definitely a sort of model Christian in a lot of ways.
yeah.
So
And I believe he won the Christian vote like 55 to 45 or something like that. And Reagan, you know, consolidated the Christian vote in the 1980s and
right.
created this movement of what we see today. I mean, he was really the kind of the foundation of it, although his politics would be anti-MAGA in many ways at this point.
Oh
But
yeah, and that's something they deny, but absolutely, he was anti-tariff. He was. Um, there were a lot of things about Reagan, but he was the beginning of this shift away from the Republican emphasis on sort of centralized government in a lot of ways, but also he moved toward the sense of basically this what he called the what do you call it? Um, his economic theories. I'm trying to think, but which the other Republicans at the time, including George H.W. Bush, the father, called voodoo economics. He talked about this idea of trickle down economics. If you make the rich richer, everyone will benefit. And
mm,
at the time, people were saying, well, that's not a working thing. But he was a movie star. He was like Hollywood, and he also embraced the right. He embraced, Jerry Falwell and others. And meanwhile, Jimmy Carter, I would say, was the most Christian in the sense of 20th century Christian president we've had. And
yeah,
he was a Sunday school teacher. I mean, he really focused on justice for the poor, but they would still say people still point to Reagan as the most Christian president we've had. And it just doesn't make any sense because there's no evidence for that. That, I mean, other than he claimed to be a good Christian, but he was not particularly a church goer and he wasn't somebody who really espoused teachings of Jesus. Um, they had this idea that somehow if you make the rich more powerful, that would somehow benefit everyone below. And we can see we're still seeing the fallout of that because we still see lower taxes on the rich. And if you look at from the 1950s, which was when America was great, America, let's make America great again. Let's go back to the 50s. The tax rate on the rich was over 50%. It was high. And now it's in the basement because of Reagan and others who like decided if we just make the rich more powerful, wealthier, that will benefit everyone below. And it's nonsense. Even like I said, even Republicans like George H.W. Bush called it voodoo economics. They called
yeah.
it that. Other Republicans called it voodoo economics. So
Well, it was a way to capture the populace, to give people a sense of belonging that we talked about, right? So that I can be wealthy and
right,
prosper. And that's why we see today this dramatic protection of the wealthy class, of the billionaire
right,
class, really,
yeah,
for absolutely no reason other than they
right,
think, oh, that money will trickle down to me somehow.
right.
Um,
If we just make the rich
yeah,
even richer, it'll benefit all of us.
yeah. And so really, I mean, you have to hand it to the moral majority and Reagan. They did a great job of
Oh
consolidating
yeah,
the Christian base. I think they saw the power of it that elected Carter, and if they could consolidate it, they could control elections. It took
right.
them, a bit to get their footing on the right messaging, stopping the infighting and all
Mm-hmm,
of that. But that was the foundation, the sense of belonging. And so they created all these moral codes,
mm-hmm,
this wealth pursuit. Um, and so yeah, so I think that's the foundation of why people headed to MAGA. Um,
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we even saw it in this past election. The A lot of folks I would ask, like, why are you voting for him? Why are you involved with that? Well, he's going to help my groceries, be
Mm,
cheaper. He's going to
right.
help my health care, right? And so they hear this messaging that they're going to take care of me. Um, my problems matter. Uh, it was powerful. Um,
Hmm.
and then so that's kind of the first point. And then the second point, and this one I think would be harder for people to admit, is the fear of loss of white social status. There's
Yes.
resentment and a desire for white power. Um,
Right.
I
Yeah, they wouldn't
think
have
the
called
reason,
it that. They probably wouldn't have described it that way, but that's what they meant. Is that the old days, the good old days, make America great, was when white people, white men, were in charge. And that's what they talk about as the good old days. They don't realize that's what they meant. Most of them, not some of them do, but some of them don't. They realize you mean when white Christian men were in charge. That's what they want a return to.
yeah. Um, and this goes in even into theology, the books we read. Um, most prominent theologians are white. That the media puts forward, that book publishers put forward.
Right.
And so even hearing a non-white theological voice is hard to do, much
Right.
less, have white people be willing to give a non-white person power in America.
Right.
And I think what we saw with Obama is the right leaning into this idea because of Obama. I think they took advantage of a black president and said,
Hmm.
look, all the problems he caused, the Make America Great Again, like you just said, and referenced, was a return to white, prominence, white power.
Hmm.
Look at all these
Hmm.
problems Obama. He's still, Trump still refers to Obama as
He's the
creating these
boogeyman. Yeah.
problems. In fact, he's
He's the
brought
boogeyman.
Obama.
Hmm.
He wants to
Yep.
bring Obama up on charges. See, he's so evil, um, and
Still
that's a direct
questioning his
that was
legitimacy
their
as a president.
yeah, that was their way in, I think, to consolidate the base, to bring unity, that we don't want this problem again.
Hmm.
This black man leading again.
Hmm.
You don't want this. Um, and white folks jumped in hook, line, and sinker. I mean, even a lot of the narratives you hear today with this Project 2025 stuff of removing DEI, let's remove the ability to be diverse. Let's make that
Right.
racist, like, which is
Right.
wild, right? That
Yep. Yep.
giving people of color opportunity is racist.
And women.
We're in
Yep.
women. We're not saying white men can't have opportunity. We're just
Right.
saying, let's bring opportunity to people of color and to
Right.
women, and apparently that's racist.
Yeah.
Um,
White male authority shouldn't be the default. And that's always been the default. It's always been like, who's in charge? White men, white Christian men are always in charge.
yeah.
And suddenly they're saying, well, people have challenged that. So we need to reinforce the fact that white men should be in charge.
And I think this is, I mean, off topic a little bit, but I think this is why Trump won this second time. Is I think people didn't realize how much white people wanted power, and the fact that a black woman was put
Yep.
as a candidate. Even people that couldn't stomach Trump were not going to vote for her
Right.
because of that. And I don't think people realize where America was. I don't think I did until after the fact, when I was
To that extent, yeah.
di- yeah,
either
diagnosing some of the problem.
they either voted for Trump or they stayed home.
Yeah. And I talked to people directly who either stayed home or voted third party, but they
Hmm.
didn't want to vote for either. And the
Right.
reason why, they didn't say this bluntly, but the reason was she was a black woman.
Yep.
So I think
Yep.
this is a big thing, and Trump and MAGA, they lean the Christian nationalist movement, they definitely lean into this. If you hear actual like on the ground Christian nationalists, they self-proclaim Christian nationalism, bluntly say that white people have more authority in the church and
Mm.
in by God, and
Right.
they don't even shy away from it,
Yeah.
you know. So
It's pretty brazen. Yeah.
yeah.
And then she
Um,
mentions the conspiracy theories, which I grew up with the conspiracy theories. I mean, I would say in some ways the rapture is a conspiracy theory, in an
mm,
ultimate sense. It's this sense of that we have the knowledge of something that's going on that everyone else is duped to, everyone else is misled, but we know the truth. And
mm.
that is rife within both the right wing and a lot of evangelical churches. They believe they understand the truth that other people don't.
Yeah, and that goes back to the belonging, like they
Mhm.
find comfort that like I know what's right, and
Right,
you need to know what's right too, and they yeah, they don't want to open themselves up to being wrong. I remember,
right.
Dan Brown. You remember the author Dan Brown,
Oh
who
yeah,
wrote those, thrillers, and
right.
those were banned in one of the churches I worked at because
Really?
it opened people up. I mean, the pastor told me, because I read them and I would talk about them, and my boss at the time, he told me we don't want those here. We don't want to talk about them because it opens people up to other views of the truth of Scripture, and
Hmm.
we don't want that. And so, like a lot of evangelical circles that I've been in, you can't even question, the truth that they hold. You can't even ask questions about it, or else
Huh.
you're ostracized. And even
Interesting.
recently, a previous denomination I was part of, just simply for asking questions, I
Oh
was
yeah.
called into the principal's office. And so I think um, these are important, right? The conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
their view on truth. And if you don't believe their conspiracy theories and their view on truth, you're not in the right. You're not a gospel believing church, is
Right.
what they'll say,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah. Well, I've known family members, I won't name names, but people who are survivalists, people who like are preparing for either the rapture, Armageddon, some other
mm,
like coming, event. And if you ask them, why do you believe that? Well, the Bible says it. Where in the Bible does it say that? I mean, we were talking, we were at an interfaith event last night, and mentioned the rapture. And one of the students, a Christian, said, um, where is the rapture in the Bible? I said, well, it's kind of coming from the epistles of Paul, the prophecies of the Old Testament. You're combining all these things. And they just kind of rolled their eyes. And I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of what the classic, I would say, conspiracy theories like the rapture are really, really bad scriptural interpretation, but also just logically, they don't make a lot of sense. But that's one of their
yeah.
keys, though, is like, it doesn't make sense. Therefore, this is a good thing. We are
Yeah, they
somehow
have all
we
the
are
charts.
that's the proof
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it doesn't make sense to the average person. So it's proof.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, that's a way to control and manipulate people too. Like if you don't believe this, then you're gonna go through the tribulation, you're gonna, have pain and suffering. So come to our side and you won't have pain and suffering.
Right.
That's kind of the manipulative tactic that they use. And the other thing that we kind of glossed over a little bit, but the loss of patriarchy, the
Mhm.
loss of male authority, male dominated authority. She mentioned in this book a lot about James Dobson creating that culture, and
Yep.
I didn't realize how ingrained it was in the culture. I kind of intuited, but he passed away recently.
Yeah.
And I posted about that and how I was thankful that he was receiving the grace that he never taught. Um, you know,
Yeah.
while he was here on earth. And I got so much backlash. I mean, people worship. I didn't
Mhm.
realize the love people had for James Dobson, even from
Yep.
people I didn't realize, connected with him in that way.
Yep.
So he had great control over this
Absolutely.
patriarchy, the male
Mhm.
dominated household, that male needs to lead, women need to submit,
Right.
men that make decisions, all of that. Um,
The whole idea of tough love came from him. You should
yeah.
punish a child because you love them.
Oh yeah.
You'll show you love them by punishing them. That's James Dobson. That's the tough
Hmm.
love idea. That's him. So
Yeah. I
people
mean,
bought his stuff even before Jerry Falwell and others.
yeah, he had great influence,
Mhm.
because he gave white males power, and so
Yep.
they liked it. You know,
Yep.
he encouraged it, and he called it biblical.
Yep. Yep.
And even though he'd be reading metaphors and try to literally interpret it, but
Well, yeah.
you
Let's
know,
not get
uh,
too analytical about this or too, but yeah, they say, well, that's kind of a metaphor. But anyway, yeah,
yeah.
they
Anyway,
yeah.
he so yeah, this male patriarchy. I mean, if you look even at Trump, and his team, it's all white men. And the one woman in this kind of circle is
There's
is his
always a token woman.
spokesperson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's his spokesperson,
Right.
who just lies for him all the time.
Right.
And she knows she has to do that or else she's gone,
She'll be out of a job.
immediately.
Yeah.
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 So we see that it's pervasive. That's the one area, as I reflect with folks that I interact with, that I know are, you know, could could be drawn into MAGA. The patriarchy is the one, I think, at least in my parish here, where people have a problem with it because they value women. And I
Hmm.
I don't know if that's New Jersey culture, Northeast culture, but
Yeah. I don't know.
as I dialogue with folks, they do value their spouse, they value women leaders, and so
Mhm.
that's one I've leaned into with people in conversation, to try to help, see the error of, this new Christian nationalist movement, MAGA ways.
Mhm.
Um, which is, one area of encouragement I have in these conversations. But it's hard to get past that sense of belonging that, this movement gives,
Sure.
and the Christian, that we talked about it last week, but the Christian part of it, like, why wouldn't we want everybody, to be Christian? And um,
Right.
here's
Yeah.
the thing, I was reading this week somebody by the name of Carl Rahner, and he talked about hope,
Mhm.
and he said there's two ways that we naturally, kind of react to hope is if we don't get what we hope for, we go into despair.
Mm.
And if we do get what we hope for, or if we create what we hope for, like if we enact a plan and we accomplish something that we're hoping for, we create a system, or we try to conserve what we created, right? And even through violence, maybe not actual pulling a gun out, but sometimes pulling a gun out, um,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
try to protect what we created, right?
Right.
We bulldoze people over, and what he was arguing that, and he's coming out of Nazi, and what he was arguing is that Christ-filled hope, is beyond all of that. That Christ hope is the resurrection. That Christ hope is life, and that Christ is hope. And so we just rest in Christ being hope, and we don't try to create
Mhm.
these systems to conserve and protect, and we don't give in to despair,
Right.
because Christ is hope. And in this conversation, I was thinking about that. And Christian nationalism, I think, it is coming out of people who lack hope, who are in despair,
Mhm.
and they've created a system, for themselves that they enact with violence. It really, sometimes literal violence, or they just bulldoze people or treat people poorly to conserve their system. And I think that's what's happening here is
Mhm.
They don't know where their hope truly is found. They think it's found in this, political system, this political figure, this movement, and it's not, and it's
Right.
sad to watch. But I thought that was interesting, reading someone who lived through Nazism, which was a
Mhm.
Christian nationalist movement. Um,
Totally.
so,
Yep. Yep.
any closing thoughts, Father Scott, as we wrap this
Yeah,
up?
I've been thinking about patriarchal part of that, that when the white power part of it, when Barack Obama was elected president, they lost their minds. This was awful. It was the worst catastrophe in the world. Imagine if a woman had been elected. A woman has never been elected president. If a woman had been elected, then you've got, and a woman of color, you've got a
Hmm.
non-white woman in charge. Yes, of course, a lot of people would have just thought this was the apocalypse, the end of the world, because a non-white
Mm,
woman was in charge over them. And yeah, that would be the end of the world for a certain element of the population.
yeah.
They had to stop it. They had to keep it from happening.
Mm,
Yep.
sad to watch,
We're seeing the
and
outcome playing out right now.
yeah, and they don't like conversations like these.
Nope.
And if
Nope.
they had their druthers, they'd shut these things down too.
Right.
You know.
Yep.
Um,
Because
so it's
they
something that
think
we,
they know what the problem is. And the
yeah,
problem is non-white people, non-white men also being in charge. That's a problem.
yeah, yeah. So Christian nationalism, it's a problem, and it should be addressed. That's why we're having this conversation. And so, I'd encourage you, if you're listening, to talk about it with people, to bring it up in healthy ways and dialogue. Because I think as you bring these things in the open, um, and have healthy dialogue, we can see change, I think, through that. So,
Yep. Absolutely.
um, yeah, well, I think we'll close it off here for today.
Okay.
Um, and we'll do another part. We'll do part three next week,
Sounds good.
on this. And thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.